You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, and honestly, when I first heard this, I thought it was a joke, a rumor, something that couldn't possibly be real. But ladies and gentlemen, this is happening. Paul Heyman, the advocate, the wise man, the special counsel to Brock Lesnar for over 2 decades, has just done the unthinkable. He's turned his back on the Beast incarnate and is now desperately calling on Team CM Punk for protection at the upcoming Raw event. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who built Brock Lesnar's empire, who stood by his side through every conquest, every championship reign, every destruction, is now so terrified of his own client that he's running to Lesnar's greatest enemy for help. This isn't just shocking, it's absolutely infuriating when you think about the sheer betrayal, the cowardice, and the chaos this is about to unleash on Monday Night Raw. If you think you know where this story is going, think again, because what's about to happen is going to change WWE forever. Smash that like button right now if you want to see Heyman get exactly what's coming to him. Drop a comment telling me if you think CM Punk would actually help the man who manipulated him for years, and make sure you're subscribed because this situation is developing by the hour and you don't want to miss a single update. Let's start from the beginning and understand how we got to this absolutely insane point in WWE history. Paul Heyman has been Brock Lesnar's advocate since Lesnar returned to WWE back in 2012. Before that, Heyman was the genius behind ECW, the mad scientist who revolutionized wrestling in the 90s, the advocate for guys like Rob Van Dam and the Dudley Boys, and the man with the golden tongue who could talk his way into or out of any situation. When Lesnar came back, Heyman was right there beside him, doing all the talking while Lesnar did all the destruction. Together they ended The Undertaker's undefeated WrestleMania streak, dominated multiple World Championship reigns, and created an aura of invincibility around Lesnar that made him the most feared competitor in WWE history. Heyman would cut these incredible promos, building up Lesnar's accomplishments, threatening his opponents, and generally making everyone believe that Brock Lesnar was an unstoppable force of nature that nobody could overcome. The partnership worked perfectly because Lesnar didn't need to talk, he just needed to show up and hurt people, while Heyman handled all the storytelling and character work that made those beatings feel even more impactful and meaningful. But here's where things started getting complicated and where the seeds of this betrayal were actually planted years ago. Paul Heyman has always been an opportunist, someone who looks out for himself first and his client second. Throughout his career, Heyman has switched allegiances, turned on partners, and done whatever was necessary to stay relevant and powerful in the wrestling business. When CM Punk was on top of WWE from 2011 to 2014, guess who aligned himself with Punk? That's right, Paul Heyman. After Punk's legendary pipe bomb promo and his historic 434-day championship reign, Heyman saw an opportunity to attach himself to the hottest act in wrestling. He became Punk's advisor, his strategic counsel, helping him navigate the political waters of WWE and maintain his position at the top of the card. The relationship between Heyman and Punk was fascinating because unlike with Lesnar where Heyman was clearly the mouthpiece for a monster, with Punk it was more of a partnership between two incredibly intelligent, manipulative individuals who respected each other's minds and abilities. That partnership eventually fell apart in spectacular fashion, as most of Heyman's relationships do. Punk and Heyman had a falling out that was both personal and professional, with accusations of manipulation, betrayal, and conflicting interests tearing apart what had been one of the most effective alliances in modern WWE history. When Punk left WWE in 2014, bitter and burned out from the politics and the grueling schedule, many people blamed Heyman at least partially for poisoning that relationship and contributing to Punk's decision to walk away from wrestling entirely. For years, Punk was gone, pursuing other interests like comic books and mixed martial arts, while Heyman continued to build Lesnar's legacy to even greater heights. Nobody thought we'd ever see these three men interacting again, especially not under circumstances like what we're witnessing now. Fast forward to recent times and CM Punk's shocking return to WWE has been one of the biggest stories in wrestling. After nearly a decade away, after all the burned bridges and bitter feelings, Punk came back and immediately became one of the focal points of Raw programming. His return brought massive attention, huge ratings, and reinvigorated interest in WWE from fans who had drifted away during his absence. Punk hasn't been back long, but he's already assembled a group of allies, what people are calling Team CM Punk, consisting of wrestlers who respect his legacy, appreciate his influence on the business, and are willing to stand beside him as he navigates this new chapter of his career. The team includes some talented young wrestlers who see Punk as a mentor, some veterans who remember his legendary original run, and some people who simply recognize that aligning with Punk gives them more visibility and opportunity than they'd have on their own. Now here's where it gets absolutely wild and where the anger really starts building. Behind the scenes, things between Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar have been deteriorating rapidly. According to multiple sources, Lesnar has become increasingly difficult to work with, increasingly violent and unpredictable, and increasingly resentful of anyone and everyone around him. The partnership that worked so perfectly for over a decade has become strained to the breaking point. Lesnar apparently feels that Heyman has been taking too much credit for his success, doing too much talking and not enough listening, and generally becoming more of a liability than an asset. Meanwhile, Heyman has supposedly grown tired of being Lesnar's mouthpiece, tired of building up a monster who shows up when he feels like it, works the schedule he demands, and treats everyone around him with barely concealed contempt. The mutual resentment has been building quietly for months, but it exploded into public view recently when Lesnar physically attacked Heyman during what was supposed to be a routine backstage segment. The attack was brutal and shocking. Lesnar grabbed Heyman by the throat, lifted him off the ground with one hand, and delivered an F5 that left Heyman crumpled in a heap on the concrete floor. The attack was so vicious, so personal, and so clearly motivated by genuine anger rather than storyline requirements that everyone watching knew something fundamental had changed in their relationship. Heyman sold the attack like he was genuinely hurt, clutching his ribs, gasping for air, looking legitimately terrified of the man he had stood beside for so many years. WWE officials had to pull Lesnar away, and even they seemed genuinely concerned about Heyman's well-being rather than just playing their parts in a scripted drama. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a legitimate dissolution of a historic partnership, and it was happening in the most violent way possible. In the days following that attack, Heyman disappeared from WWE programming entirely. No promos, no backstage segments, nothing. Rumors swirled about where he was, what condition he was in, and whether he would ever return to WWE after such a brutal assault. Some people thought Heyman would simply retire, having made enough money and enough of a mark on the business that he didn't need to subject himself to Lesnar's rage anymore. Others speculated that Heyman was plotting his revenge, waiting for the right moment to strike back at the man who had humiliated and injured him. But nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, predicted what Heyman would actually do next. This past week, Heyman resurfaced with a video message that has sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling industry. Looking battered, wearing visible bruises from Lesnar's attack, speaking in a tone that mixed fear with desperation and cunning calculation, Heyman delivered a message directly to CM Punk. He acknowledged their complicated history, admitted that he had made mistakes in their previous relationship, and then made an offer that nobody saw coming. Heyman asked, no, he begged CM Punk to help him at the upcoming Raw event, specifically requesting protection from Brock Lesnar, who Heyman claims is hunting him down to finish what he started with that F5. Heyman offered to provide Punk with inside information about Lesnar's weaknesses, his strategies, his vulnerabilities, everything that Heyman learned during their 2 decades together. In exchange, all Heyman wants is for Team CM Punk to stand between him and the Beast incarnate long enough for Heyman to figure out his next move. The audacity of this request is staggering when you really think about it. Paul Heyman, the man who helped make Brock Lesnar the most dominant force in WWE, is now willing to expose all of Lesnar's secrets to his greatest rival just to save his own skin. The betrayal is comprehensive and calculated. Heyman isn't just walking away from Lesnar, he's actively working to tear down everything they built together. He's offering to arm Punk with knowledge that could theoretically end Lesnar's reign of terror, knowledge about psychological triggers, physical limitations, strategic patterns, everything that could give someone an advantage against the seemingly invincible Beast. This isn't just switching sides, it's burning down your entire legacy despite the person you helped create. From Punk's perspective, this has to be an incredibly complicated situation. On one hand, Heyman manipulated him years ago, contributed to the circumstances that drove him out of WWE, and represents a lot of the political games and backstage manipulation that Punk has always claimed to despise about the wrestling business. Accepting Heyman's offer would mean aligning himself with someone he has every reason not to trust, someone whose word means nothing because he's proven time and time again that he'll say or do anything to serve his own interests. On the other hand, the intelligence Heyman is offering about Lesnar is invaluable. Punk has never been able to beat Lesnar in their previous encounters. Lesnar's combination of size, strength, legitimate fighting ability, and pure aggression has always been too much for Punk to overcome. Having insider information about how to exploit Lesnar's weaknesses could be the difference between victory and destruction when they inevitably clash again. The WWE Universe is absolutely divided on this situation, and that division is creating some of the most heated debates we've seen in years. Some fans think Punk would be absolutely insane to trust Heyman even for a second. They point to Heyman's history of betrayal, his pattern of using people and then discarding them when they're no longer useful, and the likelihood that this is all some elaborate scheme where Heyman ends up betraying Punk again at the worst possible moment. These fans argue that Punk should reject Heyman's offer completely, tell him to face the consequences of his actions alone, and refuse to get involved in what is essentially a domestic dispute between Heyman and Lesnar. They see accepting Heyman's offer as weakness, as Punk compromising his principles for short-term tactical advantage, and they're worried that it will end badly for everyone except Heyman, who always seems to land on his feet no matter how many bridges he burns. Other fans think Punk would be stupid not to take advantage of this opportunity. They argue that Punk doesn't have to trust Heyman personally to recognize the value of the information he's offering. They point out that Punk is smart enough to use Heyman without being used by him, that he can extract what he needs while keeping Heyman at arm's length and maintaining control of the situation. These fans see this as a rare chance for Punk to finally get a real advantage over Lesnar, to level the playing field in a rivalry where he's always been at a physical disadvantage. They also enjoy the storytelling potential of this alliance, the drama of watching two former partners reunite under desperate circumstances, the tension of wondering when the inevitable betrayal will happen and who will betray whom first. The implications for the upcoming Raw event are massive and potentially explosive. WWE has been promoting this episode as must-see television, and now we know why. Brock Lesnar will be there, hunting for Paul Heyman, presumably to finish destroying the man who stood by his side for so long. Heyman will be there, hiding behind whatever protection he can arrange, desperately trying to avoid Lesnar's wrath. CM Punk and his team will be there, forced to make a decision about whether to involve themselves in this situation or stay out of it entirely. The potential for chaos, for surprise returns, for shocking betrayals and unexpected alliances, is off the charts. This isn't just another episode of Raw. This is the kind of must-see event that creates moments wrestling fans remember and discuss for decades. Think about the possible scenarios that could play out. Maybe Punk agrees to help Heyman and Team CM Punk surrounds the Advocate, creating a human shield between him and Lesnar. That leads to Lesnar having to fight through multiple opponents to get to Heyman, creating absolute carnage in the process. Maybe Punk rejects Heyman's offer publicly, leaving him to fend for himself, which leads to Lesnar destroying Heyman in the middle of the ring while Punk watches from the ramp with a satisfied smirk. Maybe Punk appears to agree to help but then betrays Heyman at the crucial moment, feeding him to Lesnar as payback for their history. Maybe Heyman is playing everyone and this whole thing is an elaborate trap designed to lure Punk into a vulnerable position where Lesnar can destroy him. The possibilities are endless and all of them are compelling television. What makes this even more interesting is the business aspect of the situation. WWE needs Lesnar to remain a credible threat, a final boss-level opponent who can be wheeled out for major events and special occasions. But they also need to build new stars and create compelling storylines that give younger talent opportunities to shine. Punk's return has been great for business, bringing back lapsed fans and generating mainstream attention. Heyman's face turn, if that's what this is, creates interesting new storytelling possibilities and allows him to showcase different aspects of his character beyond just being Lesnar's mouthpiece. The challenge for WWE Creative is balancing all these competing interests, maintaining Lesnar's aura of dominance while also making Punk and his team look strong, giving Heyman meaningful screen time without making him look too sympathetic given his history of manipulation, and delivering a Raw episode that lives up to the massive hype they're generating around this situation. The historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. We're potentially watching the end of one of the most successful advocate-client relationships in WWE history. Heyman and Lesnar defined each other for over a decade. You couldn't think of one without thinking of the other. Their partnership elevated both men to legendary status and created countless memorable moments. Ending that partnership isn't something WWE would do lightly, which suggests this is a long-term storytelling decision rather than a short-term angle. The ramifications will echo through WWE programming for months or even years to come. Who advocates for Lesnar now? Does he even need an advocate or does his rage make him more dangerous without Heyman there to strategize? What does Heyman do if he survives Lesnar's wrath? Does he permanently align with Punk or does he find a new monster to hide behind? These questions will shape WWE's creative direction going forward. The emotional complexity of this situation is what makes it so compelling beyond just the violence and shock value. Paul Heyman genuinely seems scared in his video message to Punk. Whether that fear is real or manufactured is almost beside the point because Heyman is one of the best actors in wrestling history and he's selling this fear perfectly. You can see the desperation in his eyes, hear the tremor in his voice, sense the genuine worry that he's pushed Lesnar too far and created a monster he can no longer control. That emotional authenticity makes the story feel real in a way that most wrestling angles don't. We're not watching cartoon characters play out a predetermined script. We're watching people dealing with the consequences of broken relationships, betrayed trust, and genuine fear for their physical safety. Brock Lesnar's motivation in all of this is fascinating to examine. On the surface, he's angry at Heyman for perceived disloyalty, for taking too much credit, for becoming a burden rather than an asset. But dig deeper and there might be more going on psychologically. Lesnar has always been someone who values respect above almost everything else. His entire persona is built on dominance, on being the alpha predator who stands above everyone else. Having his advocate, his spokesperson, the man who was supposed to make him look even more dominant, turn against him is the ultimate sign of disrespect. It's not just about Heyman leaving or wanting to work with someone else. It's about Heyman thinking he can survive without Lesnar, thinking he's smart enough to outmaneuver the beast, thinking he can run to Lesnar's enemies for protection. That level of disrespect demands the most brutal response possible, which is exactly what Lesnar is promising to deliver. CM Punk's psychology is equally complex. He's always been motivated by proving people wrong, by showing that he's the best despite not fitting the traditional WWE superstar mold, by succeeding on his own terms rather than playing the political games. Accepting Heyman's offer could be seen as exactly the kind of political maneuvering Punk claimed to be against. But Punk is also incredibly pragmatic. He knows that wrestling is a business, that sometimes you have to make deals with devils to achieve your goals, and that principle without power is just posturing. If Punk decides to help Heyman, it won't be because he trusts him or forgives him. It'll be because the strategic advantage is too valuable to pass up, because the opportunity to finally gain an edge over Lesnar is worth the risk of working with someone he doesn't trust, because sometimes the enemy of your enemy really is your friend even if that friendship is temporary and transactional. The Team CM Punk dynamic adds another layer to consider. Punk's allies have their own opinions and interests in this situation. Some of them might be eager to take on Lesnar, seeing it as an opportunity to make a name for themselves by standing up to the most dangerous man in WWE. Others might be cautious, recognizing that getting involved in this war could result in serious injury with no guarantee of benefit. Punk will have to navigate his team's various perspectives, convince them that his decision is the right one, and maintain unity in the face of potential disaster. Leadership isn't just about making decisions, it's about bringing people along with you, and Punk's ability to keep his team together through this crisis will define whether Team CM Punk is a real faction or just a temporary alliance of convenience. The fan reaction when all of this plays out on Raw is going to be absolutely nuclear. Wrestling fans love surprises, love seeing long-term stories pay off in unexpected ways, and love moments where real emotion breaks through the scripted entertainment. Whether Punk helps Heyman or abandons him, whether Lesnar gets his revenge or is somehow thwarted, whether new alliances form or old wounds are reopened, the live crowd and the viewing audience at home are going to lose their minds. Social media will explode with reactions, think pieces will be written analyzing every decision and every consequence, and wrestling discourse will be dominated by this storyline for weeks or months afterward. What's particularly brilliant about this angle is that there's no clearly right answer about what Punk should do. Wrestling storytelling is at its best when both choices have merit, when the protagonist faces a genuine dilemma rather than an obvious good versus evil decision. Helping Heyman makes strategic sense but moral sense is questionable. Refusing to help makes moral sense but strategic sense is questionable. Either choice has consequences, both positive and negative, and watching those consequences play out is what creates compelling long-term storytelling. WWE Creative deserves credit for putting their characters in genuinely difficult positions rather than taking the easy way out with simple black and white morality. As we approach this upcoming Raw event, the tension continues building. Heyman is increasingly desperate in his public appeals to Punk. Lesnar is increasingly visible in his preparations, posting videos of brutal training sessions that seem designed to send a message about what he plans to do to Heyman when he finds him. Punk has remained strategically silent, not committing one way or the other, keeping everyone guessing about what his decision will be. The uncertainty is part of what makes this so compelling. We genuinely don't know what's going to happen, and that's a rare and precious thing in modern wrestling where so much is predictable and telegraphed weeks in advance. The potential for this situation to create new stars and elevate existing talent is significant. Members of Team CM Punk who stand out during any confrontation with Lesnar will get massive exposure and credibility. A young wrestler who shows courage in the face of Lesnar's assault, who takes a beating but keeps getting back up, who proves they belong in the main event scene through their actions rather than just their words, could see their career trajectory change overnight. WWE needs new stars desperately, needs to build the next generation while their established stars are still around to pass the torch, and this kind of high-stakes, high-visibility situation is exactly how you create those breakout moments. The business ramifications extend beyond just WWE as well. The wrestling industry as a whole is watching this situation develop because it touches on fundamental questions about loyalty, about the relationships between managers and clients, about how you handle broken partnerships and bitter divorces in a business where you often have to continue working with people you no longer trust or respect. Other promotions will learn from how WWE handles this, will see what works and what doesn't, and will apply those lessons to their own storytelling. The ripple effects of how this situation resolves will influence wrestling booking decisions across multiple companies and multiple continents. So here we are, days away from what could be one of the most memorable Raw episodes in recent history. Paul Heyman, desperate and terrified, has made his plea to CM Punk for protection against Brock Lesnar's promised destruction. The wrestling world is divided on whether Punk should help, whether Heyman deserves help, and what the consequences will be regardless of what decision is made. The upcoming Raw event promises chaos, violence, shocking moments, and the kind of must-see television that wrestling fans live for. Whether you love these characters or hate them, whether you're Team Punk or Team Lesnar or Team Heyman or Team Chaos, you absolutely cannot miss what's about to happen. This is the kind of moment that defines eras, that creates legends, that gets talked about for years and decades afterward. Make sure you're watching, make sure you're ready, because what Paul Heyman started with his desperate call for help is about to explode in ways nobody can fully predict or control.